Have you ever looked at a data team and wondered who actually does what? With all the different titles flying around, it can get, well, pretty confusing. So in this explainer, we're going to clear all that up. We're breaking down who the key players are, what they do, and, maybe most importantly, how they all fit together. Okay, let's just dive right in with this quote, because it really gets to the heart of everything we're talking about today. See, working with data isn't a solo mission. It's a journey. It's more like a relay race, where the baton, the data, gets passed from one expert to the next, and each person adds a crucial piece to the puzzle along the way. It really wasn't that long ago that a single business analyst might have tried to do it all. But today, with the sheer explosion of data, its size, its complexity, that one role has basically expanded and specialized into an entire team. We're really talking about a whole spectrum of different skills that you need to make sense of the modern data landscape. So here's our game plan. We're going to follow the data on its journey through an organization, just like that relay race I mentioned. We'll start with who builds the foundation. Then we'll see how that data gets cleaned up and refined. From there, who turns it into a story you can actually see, and who uses that story to make big decisions. Finally, we'll put it all together to see the entire data spectrum in one clear picture. You can't build anything great without a solid foundation, right? Well, it's the exact same thing in the world of data. And that's what we're going to start. So meet the first person in our data relay race, the one who literally lays the groundwork for everybody else, the data engineer. So what is a data engineer? Think of them as the master architects and, honestly, the master plumbers of the data world. Their job is to build and maintain the actual systems, the pipelines that all this data flows through. They're the ones pulling information from all these different, sometimes messy sources and getting it all into one central, stable place.
So the absolutely crucial point here is that they do the heavy lifting up front. They handle the messy, complicated work of getting raw data out of one system, clean it up, and loading it into another, a process you'll often hear called ETL. They do what's called data wrangling, which is basically taming all that chaotic information so the rest of the team has something clean and organized to start with.
All right, so the data is in the house, so to speak, but it's still not quite ready for prime time. Someone needs to come in, refine it, organize it, and make it truly useful for analysis. And this brings us to the next runner in our relay, the analytics engineer. This role is such an important bridge. Honestly, it popped up because companies realized there was this huge gap between the raw data pipelines and the analysts who needed clean, trustworthy information to do their jobs. The analytics engineer takes those raw materials from the data engineer and transforms them into polished, reliable data models that people can actually use with confidence.
Now, what's really interesting is how this clarifies the difference. Here's a great way to think about it. The data engineer builds the massive, multi-lane superhighway to get all the data into the city. The analytics engineer then comes in and builds the clean, well-lit, and clearly marked exit ramps that lead directly to the specific neighborhoods, the business reports, where that data needs to go.
Okay, the baton is passed once again. We've got clean, we've got reliable, we've got model data. Awesome. But right now, it's still just numbers sitting in a database. Someone needs to step in and turn all that into a story that we, as humans, can actually understand. And that's where the data analyst comes in. The data analyst is, for all intents and purposes, the storyteller. They are the ones who take that beautifully prepared data and use tools like Power BI, for example, to build the charts, the reports, and the interactive dashboards that make the numbers come alive. They're translators, turning complex data into insights you can see at a glance. And this is so important to understand. Their job is way more than just making pretty charts. They're responsible for the entire reporting ecosystem. That means designing it, building it, managing it, and even securing it, making sure that only the right people see the right information. It's a huge responsibility. So let's do a quick recap of our relay race, shall we? First up, the data engineer gets the raw data flowing. Then the analytics engineer steps in to refine and model that data into a trustworthy product. And finally, the data analyst takes that product and visualizes it, turning it into a clear, compelling story. But hang on, the journey isn't over yet. A story is only useful if someone actually listens to it, and more importantly, acts on it. This brings us to the final leg of our race, the people who interpret these data stories and use them to decide what happens next. Now, this is a super common point of confusion, but the difference is absolutely critical. Think of it like this. A data analyst creates the dashboard that shows sales are down 10%. The business analyst looks at that dashboard, understands the wider business context, and says, okay, sales are down because of our competitor's new ad campaign, and here is what I recommend we do about it. See the difference? It's all about interpretation and driving action.
Okay, so what about the other big title you always hear, the data scientist? Where do they fit in? Are they off in their own separate universe, totally disconnected from the data analyst? It's a really common question.
Well, the short answer is no. That idea that they're completely different, it's just not true. They aren't on opposite ends of the spectrum at all. In fact, more often than not, they work together in a really powerful partnership. So picture this. A data scientist might use some advanced machine learning to predict which customers are most likely to leave the company. They do all this complex, forward-looking analysis, but once they have their findings, who helps them explain that complicated model to the CEO? They often turn right back to the data analyst to help visualize and report those results, bridging that gap between a highly technical prediction and a clear business action plan.
All right, we've met all the key players in our relay race. So now, let's zoom out and look at that finish line photo so we can see how the entire team lines up together.
And here it is. This is basically your cheat sheet. You've got the data engineer building the infrastructure, the analytics engineer curating and modeling the data analyst visualizing it, the business analyst interpreting it, and the data scientist using it to predict what's next. Each role has a unique focus, but they are all working together on the same path, adding value at every step. And that right there is the biggest takeaway. This is a team sport. Each person in this chain is passing the baton to the next with the shared goal of turning messy, raw data into real, tangible business value. It is absolutely not a hierarchy where one role is better than another. It's a collaborative process where every single step is essential to success.
So as we wrap this up, that really leaves just one final question for you to think about. In this incredible collaborative journey of turning data into insight, which role will you play?